Hello and welcome to Business 360. I'm Shireen Bandh. The headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. The Sensex and the Nifty end in the red after a volatile session. Blue chips decline, but mid-caps buck the trend. The rupee tests another record low against the dollar, even as it remains largely steady. Three companies make their debut on the Lal Street. Senores Pharma and Ventive Hospitality list at a premium. Carraro India lists at an 8% discount. Adani Group is all set to cash out of the joint venture Adani Wilmar and gain nearly $2 billion. Adani Enterprises will sell 13% stake to meet the minimum public shareholding norms. Wilmar will acquire the remaining 31%. India Inc. meets Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman ahead of the Feb 1 union budget. Bats for a 25% higher capex allocation, a cut in Securities Transaction Tax, among others. Also seeks the support for the MSME sector in the form of credit guarantees and easier compliance. IRDAI initiates industry consultation on insurance premia GST. Sources say health insurers want GST reduction from 18% to 12%, but with input tax credit benefits. Life insurers bat for a 0 or a 5% GST along with ITC benefits. Insurance companies will formally submit their views in about a week. EdTech company PhysicsWallah is expected to launch an IPO soon. Sources say the company is looking to raise $500 million at a valuation of $5 billion. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump supports H-1B visas, backing Elon Musk's stance, even as Republicans remain deeply divided. Elon Musk also adds the visa program is broken, needs reforms, after saying he will go to war over the issue. South Korea orders a safety inspection of the country's entire airline operations after 179 people are killed in an air crash, announces an audit of all aircraft involved in domestic operations. Traffic and public transport across large parts of Punjab come to a standstill and dozens of trains are cancelled after farmers called for a bandh demanding legal guarantee on minimum support price. A Supreme Court appointed panel will hold talks to the farmers later this week. The Indian Space Research Organisation will launch its final mission for 2024 later tonight, attempting a space docking experiment. The mission is crucial to achieve future goals like setting up a space station and sending a human to the moon. Well, let's start with the market action of the day. The Sensex and the Nifty, failing to hold on to the early gains, ended the day in the red. The Sensex was down by about 450 points. 78,248 is where it's closed for the day. The Nifty down by about 170 points. The Nifty Bank lost about 400 points almost today. Mid-caps bucking the trend, closing in the green. So that was the mid-cap index for you. And that's how the markets panned out. Rima standing by now to wrap up the market action. We're almost at the close of 2024. Rima, what's the market telling you?
Volatility picked up in the penultimate day of calendar year 2024 as the Nifty swung in a 300-point range in a holiday-thin trade, but ultimately ending pretty much near the day's low. It was a cut of close to about 0.5% on the benchmark indices. The Nifty ending below the 200-day moving average of 23,860 after touching a high of 23,915. In fact, as we said, fairly volatile. It opened on the quieter side. There was a big surge in the markets led by the Nifty Bank and large cap private sector banks. But in the second half of the trading session, selling emerged, particularly at elevated levels. The mid-cap index managed to close in the green, but the advanced decline ratio was firmly in favor of the losing side. The sectoral gainers today were healthcare and IT, but on the weaker side were banks, autos, metals. The big IT movers were HCL Tech and Tech Mahindra. Adani Enterprises was clearly the stock of the day. For one, the Navi Mumbai airport has done its validation test, so that's a positive, and it contributes quite a bit to Adani Enterprises SOTP. And secondly, the company has announced that they will be exiting Adani Wilmar completely, and thereby they will be injecting liquidity into Adani Adani Enterprises. So that was the big mover. Pharma was on the front foot. Names like Sun Pharma, Cipla, Apollo Hospitals closing up in the green. For banks, it was a mixed bag. IndusInd Bank managed to close up, but under pressure were Kotak Mahindra Bank, HDFC Bank, Kotak Mahindra Bank. Other drags include Hindalco, JSW Steel in the metal pack. Trend, which has been a big wealth creator, saw some profit booking towards the close of the year. M&M and Tata Motors in the auto pack was subdued. BEL came in for profit booking too. 2 out of the 3 new listings of the day had a positive finish. Senores Pharma opened with gain of more than about 50 but gave up a bit, but still a very strong closing for Senores Pharma, Ventive Hospitality too, closing up quite smartly. Other movers include JSW Energy, Greaves Cotton, Vodafone Idea, Zomato, and on the way down you had Ola, BHEL, NMDC, MobiKwik, and Signity and Sagility.
All right, Rima, many thanks. That's the stock market action for you. In the money market, the rupee remained largely steady in trade, even as it tested another record low. The rupee remains above 85.50 against the dollar. It's depreciated by over 3% this year. Meanwhile, in the bond market, the 10-year bond yield remains largely steady. Now, Adani Group is all set to cash out of its joint venture Adani Wilmar and gain nearly $2 billion. Adani Enterprises will sell 13% stake to meet the minimum public shareholding norms. Wilmar will acquire the remaining 31% and will take steps to change the name of the company. Vinny is standing by with more details. Long expected lines, Vinny, but finally a deal going through.
Absolutely, a long expected lines, because we'd heard it coming in and coming. When was it coming? This is finally here. So yes, they will be cashing out of Adani Wilmar, Adani Enterprises. $2 billion is what they will be getting off this deal. So they had this JV with Wilmar International. As of now, in Adani Wilmar, what Adani Enterprises holds is 44% stake. So two-part deal, right? One is going to be an OFS. The other one is where Wilmar International will buy the remaining stake. So they will be selling 13% via OFS. This is to meet the minimum shareholding requirement. Then Wilmar International will buy the 31%, remaining 31% stake that Adani Enterprises holds in Adani Wilmar. So all in all, that totals up to around 44% stake that Adani Enterprises is holding in Adani Wilmar. So that is a complete exit that will be coming in. Now, where will they be using this money? That's going to be interesting, right? So obviously proceeds are going to be used in terms of turbocharging the growth. Core infrastructure platforms like energy, utility, transportation, as well as logistics is what they will be using this for. And why is it a positive for Adani Enterprises is because it means that, you know, that overhang that was there in terms of whether you look at it in terms of liquidity side, that is off. In terms of debt concerns and everything that is there. So that was a big concern, and that is why a positive on that front. And let's not forget, this is the first major transaction that's come in from the Adani Group, especially after the DOJ's indictment that we'd seen in November. So an interesting one that we're keeping an eye out on. And finally, Adani Enterprises has announced that it will be exiting Adani Wilmar.
All right, Vinny, many thanks for joining us. Now, three companies making their debut on the Lal Street today. Let's start with Senores Pharma, which made a blockbuster start with a premium of 53%. Some gains, though, were paired after the listing, but the stock still ended the day with healthy gains. A strong listing reflects the overwhelming demand seen during the IPO, which was subscribed 93 times. The company focuses on generic drugs and specialty medications across various therapeutics. Blackstone-backed Ventive Hospitality has also made a strong debut. Shares listed at a premium of over 12% over the IPO price. The IPO was subscribed nearly 10 times. Ventive Hospitality is a joint venture between Blackstone and Punjab Realty, focusing on luxury offerings across India.
5, 4, 3.
And Carraro India made a lackluster debut on the Lal Street. The company shares listed at a discount of 8%. The company specializes in axles and transmission systems for agricultural and construction vehicles. The IPO was fully subscribed on the last day. The company commands a valuation of over 3,600 crore rupees. Well, speaking of IPOs, PhysicsWallah is gearing up for an IPO in the next 4 to 6 months and is looking to raise $500 million. Remember, the EdTech unicorn had raised $210 million in September at a valuation of $2.8 billion. Rachna joins us now with more. Rachna, what is the valuation target for PhysicsWallah as far as the IPO is concerned?
$5 billion. That's the valuation that Alak Pandey at PhysicsWallah is eyeing for its upcoming IPO. Now, CNBC TV18 has exclusively learned from its sources that $5 billion is the valuation, and the plan is to raise about $500 million. The IPO is expected in the next 4 to 6 months. This will make PhysicsWallah the first pure-play edtech company to hit the public markets. The company has roped in Axis Capital, Mahindra Capital, Goldman Sachs, and JP Morgan as its book-running lead managers. This comes just days after the company transitioned to being a public limited company, rebranding itself as PhysicsWallah Limited. And just in September, PhysicsWallah raised about $210 million at a valuation of $2.8 billion. And now, in less than a year, they would be seeking double of that at $5 billion. This is despite reporting a revenue of 1,940 crore rupees in FY24 at a loss of about 1,130 crore rupees. As the IPO draws closer, all eyes will be on PhysicsWallah and how they plan to balance their growth ambitions along with profitability.
All right, Rachna, that is going to be the one to watch very closely. Thanks very much. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman chaired her 5th pre-consultation ahead of the Feb 1 budget. Representatives from industry bodies, CII, ASSOCHAM and PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry attended the meeting along with others. The Finance Ministry has been holding pre-budget meetings with various stakeholders to get views on board ahead of the budget printing process. Shivani joins us now with the key takeaways. What's on the wish list, Shivani?
Well, the industry leaders have met Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman for the pre-budget consultations here in Delhi and presented the proposals to boost growth, employment and the business environment in India. CII called for reforms on labour-intensive sectors like garments, tourism and real estate, along with enhanced credit guarantees and a unified compliance platform for MSMEs to drive job creation in that area. Now, they also recommended a 25% increase in capital expenditure, prioritising rural infrastructure and irrigation. Tax reforms were a key focus, with FICCI also urging simpler compliance processes and reduced litigation. While PHDCCI called for cutting tax rates on individuals and LLPs to 25% and addressing the inverted duty structure to boost manufacturing competitiveness. Proposals to boost consumption included lowering excise duties on fuel and reducing of marginal tax rates to increase disposable incomes in India. Now, sustainability featured prominently with calls for a green transition fund, a national water security mission and the measures to enhance climate resilience in India overall. Industry bodies emphasized lowering compliance costs as well, streamlining procedures and improving logistics to attract investment and ease business operations in India. The industry expects a 51 lakh crore rupees union budget with increased capital spending to drive demand, create jobs and position India as a global trade hub while ensuring sustainability and inclusive growth.
The suggestions are on how to provide impetus on sectors that have high, labor intensity, onto MSMEs, ideas on integrating with global value chains. We've spoken about areas that, on divestment of public enterprises. We've spoke for resource mobilization and also investing in using those resources to invest in a sovereign fund to look at some strategic areas.
We are very lucky to have a growth-oriented budget last year also. We have requested them to reduce taxes so that we get more money in the hands of people. And with more money in the hands of people, this will help the economy grow further and will also have impact on the inflation also.
So I think we focused really on simplification of procedures, rationalization of things like TDSs, single GST numbers for MSMEs, moving goods across states. So I think it was a pretty worthwhile discussion.
And you can catch our budget special coverage. Tune into News Centre at 5 p.m. and 9:30 p.m. tonight on CNBC TV 18 as we bring you the budget wish list for Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman. And the government has initiated a probe into ride-hailing platforms like Ola, Uber and Rapido. This comes after allegations of differential pricing for identical rides based on the user's mobile operating system. Now, responding to charges that iPhone users are being charged more than Android users, the Consumer Affairs Minister Prahlad Joshi has called for zero tolerance for consumer exploitation and directed the Consumer Protection Authority to conduct a probe into the matter. Shares of Ola Electric declined over 5% after its market share fell to nearly 19% in December. Bajaj Auto and TVS led the electric two-wheeler race. Bajaj has a market share of 25% currently and TVS a market share of 23%. Ola Electric sold only 13,000 scooters in December compared to 30,000 in November. Ola has also seen some top-level exits. Its Chief Marketing Officer Anshul Khandelwal and Chief Technology Officer Suvanil Chatterjee have both resigned, citing personal reasons. Nearly 500 employees have left the company in the last couple of months. And some more top-level exits at new age tech companies. According to Money Control, Zepto's Vice President of Central Operations, Jitendra Bagga, quit due to logistical reasons. Bagga had joined Zepto 9 months ago after spending 3 years at Raymond. This is the second senior-level exit at the quick commerce company. The Chief Human Resource Officer, Dinesh Gomez, resigned earlier this month and is now serving his notice period. A public interest litigation seeking the quashing of TDS has been filed before the Supreme Court. The petitioner alleges that the mechanism is arbitrary and that the government is unfairly shifting its responsibility of tax collection onto private citizens. The apex court is yet to decide whether it will take up this matter or not. Now, shares of insurance companies in the spotlight today. The GST Council has asked the insurance regulator to submit its recommendations on reducing GST. Now, sources say that companies will submit their views to the regulator in a week's time. Yash is standing by with the details. Yash, what does the industry want?
Well, that's correct, Shireen. As you rightly pointed out, the insurance regulator, that is IRDAI, is likely to have started the process of gathering industry feedback when it comes to changes on two things that are under consideration: health insurance as well as term life insurance. What is the process or the flow of this feedback going to be? Over the next 1 week, life insurance companies as well as health insurance companies are likely to submit their views in terms of the changes in the GST that they expect with their respective councils, that is Life Insurance Council as well as General Insurance Council. The councils would then submit the recommendation to the regulator, that is IRDAI, post which they will be submitted to the Finance Ministry by the regulator itself. What is the demand? Speaking about health insurance companies, most health insurance companies wants GST to be reduced to 12% from the current 18%, but with an important caveat of having a complete income tax, input tax credit benefit coming in with that 12% GST. Currently, the GST is at 18%. Some of the health insurance companies have also said not to exempt, but to reduce GST to 0% or 5%, again with complete input tax benefit coming on those rates. Do remember just some numbers. Health insurance companies incur about 6 rupees as GST on procuring every 100 rupees of premium. What is the demand from life insurance companies? Insurers want GST on term life insurance to be reduced to 0% or 5% with complete input tax credit benefit. Currently, the GST is at 18%. Barring a few life insurance companies which incur about 6 rupees on 100 rupees of term life insurance premium, most life insurance companies incur about 10 to 12 rupees on incurring that on procuring that 100 rupees of term life insurance premium.
Yash, appreciate you joining us. That's the latest there, up for perusal of the GST Council once the IRDA finally takes a call. Coming up next, US President-elect Donald Trump supports H-1B visas, backing Elon Musk's stance, even as Republicans remain deeply divided. That's more when we return. US President-elect Donald Trump has come out in support of Elon Musk's stance on H-1B visas a day after the tech billionaire, now key Trump aide, vowed to go to war to defend the program. Trump jumped to Musk's defense after the Twitter owner got embroiled in a social media spat with users professing anti-immigration views. Parikshit is standing by. Parikshit, the new H-1B rules kick in January and kicking off a social media storm in the US already. What are you hearing on which way this is likely to go?
Well, a social media storm, and how. Elon Musk is someone who is himself a beneficiary of the H-1B visa program, and he has gone on Twitter to literally say that he can go to war with anyone to protect the program. Most recently, he said that the H-1B program is broken and needs major reform. What he essentially meant was that the minimum salary threshold needs to be increased, and every year a maintenance fee needs to be paid to keep your H-1B visa. So this would make the cost higher to employ foreign workers. But on the whole, both Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, who are heading the Department of Government Efficiency in the Trump administration, they've said and advocated for continuing the H-1B program and saying that America must hire the best talent from around the world to maintain its dominance around the world. But on the other hand, you've got MAGA supporters and some diehard Republicans like Steve Bannon who've questioned big tech companies for hiring people from abroad. And they've also said that immigration will actually change the fate of the Western society in a very negative way. Nikki Haley has said that America first must be the policy that must be followed. And many Trump supporters have taken to Twitter and said that the likes of Sriram Krishnan, who have been hired as policy advisor on AI to Donald Trump and the White House, undermine the America First approach. In fact, Krishnan has been called, in a way, a supporter of the India First program. And that's why we are seeing a lot of uncertainty about what may happen. when it comes to Donald Trump, he's somebody who himself has changed his stand on H-1B a number of times. Most recently, he's taken the side of Donald Trump and said that I like H-1B visas and that's why they continue. India is the biggest beneficiary of H-1B. 72% of H-1B visas went to India in 2023. 1.14 lakh H-1B visas were issued to Indian nationals in the year FY25. So the numbers continue to be very high. But we are going to see a lot of changes to the H-1B visa rules starting the 17th of January, which includes a faster, more streamlined process for H-1B renewals. Also, additional documentation required for the qualifications and jobs that you are applying for. There will also be cases where the promoter who holds 50% equity in a company can self-apply for an H-1B and for his spouse as well. So a lot of changes going to take place from the 17th of January. But remember, all of that could change once again after Trump enters the White House with his cabinet.
All right, Parikshit, many thanks. Now, the big international story, South Korea has ordered a safety inspection of the country's entire airline operations after 179 people were killed in an air crash. The country's interim president has announced an audit of all aircraft involved in domestic operations. Here's a report on the disaster and its aftermath.
After South Korea's deadliest ever air disaster, the country's acting president, Choi Sang-mok, ordered an emergency safety inspection of its entire airline operations system on Monday. That came as investigators worked to identify victims and find out what caused Sunday's Jeju Air plane crash, which claimed the lives of 175 passengers and 4 of the 6 crew on board. A large memorial was set up in a gym about 5 miles from the crash site at Muan, where people including Choi came to pay respects. Meanwhile, the Transport Ministry said it would inspect all Boeing 737-800 aircraft operated in South Korea and look closely into its maintenance management systems. Authorities have recovered the black box from the crashed Jeju Air jet and say the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board will be joining in the investigation. The aircraft, which was coming in from Bangkok, had belly landed, skidded off the end of the runway, and smashed into a wall. A Transport Ministry official said Monday that Jeju Air pilot had declared Mayday and reported a bird strike. He added there wasn't time after the warning to prepare for what came next.
If there had been more time, they could have requested preparation measures, such as dispatching fire trucks to stand by and preparing for an emergency landing. Typically, in such cases, the pilot makes this request and the control tower coordinates by placing firefighting teams on standby.
The crash killed mostly local South Koreans who were returning from holidays in Thailand. However, 2 Thai nationals also died. They include Jongluk Dwangmani. Her father, Boon Choi, spoke to local media Sunday and expressed his wish for his daughter to be brought home.
I can only accept it, make peace with it. When I think about it, I remind myself that it was an accident. It's something that can happen to anyone. So I've come to terms with it because no matter what I do, my daughter won't come back. I just hope the government can provide some help. I want to bring my daughter's body back home for a proper religious ceremony.
Well, 2024 is ending on a sour note for the aviation industry. Last week saw 4 incidents with more than 200 people losing their lives. Azerbaijan's president has said that the Azerbaijan airline passenger plane that crashed last week, killing 38 people, was damaged by accidental shooting by Russia. The plane was jammed electronically and had been shot while it was approaching the southern Russian city of Grozny. The Azerbaijan president said he wanted Russia to accept it was guilty of damning the plane and to punish those responsible. Remember, on Saturday, Russian President Vladimir Putin apologized to Azerbaijan for the tragic incident. Now, the RBI has released its latest financial stability report. The central bank is largely sanguine on bad loans. Ritu standing by with more details. Ritu, what does the RBI have to say at the end of 2024?
Well, Shireen, the key headline is that these macro stress test results, again, which are not forecasts, they're based on adverse hypothetical scenarios. They find that relative to the regulatory minimum capital requirement, even under the severe stress scenario, both banks and NBFCs will be adequately capitalized to deal with any kind of stress. Similarly, clearing corporations and mutual funds also attest to the resilience of these segments. But if you look at the stress test itself, and again, it's a hypothetical situation, but if it were to materialize, even in the baseline scenario, there is a rise in stress. And in the worst case scenario, gross NPAs of both banks and NBFCs could more than double 1.5 years ahead, that is by March of 2026. Now, currently, the bank's NPA, the report finds, is at a 12-year low at 2.6%, for instance. But if you look at the stress test results, under the baseline scenario, it sees that the gross NPAs could go up from 2.6% as of the end of September all the way to 3% by March of 2026, whereas in the worst case scenario, it could go all the way up to 5.3%. As far as public and private sector and foreign banks are concerned, most of the hit is expected on the public sector banks, which do have a higher share of the NPAs. The rise for them will also be sharper, from 3.3% as of September to 7.3% in the worst case, whereas for private banks, gross NPAs could go up from 1.9% to 2.9%. In terms of capital adequacy, there's not a sharp dip that is expected, because remember, in the last couple of years, banks have been building their buffers. So from 16.6% as of September, this is the capital adequacy ratio of all the banks put together, it could fall to 15.7% in the baseline scenario, and in the worst case scenario also not much further. If you look at the NBFC picture, not very different, because some of these segments where RBI has been highlighting stress, whether that is personal loans, the MFI segment, the NBFCs do have larger exposures. So in terms of the stress test result, the gross NPA ratio of the sample of NBFCs that RBI has studied could go up from 3.9% as of September in the baseline case to 3.4%, and in the worst case scenario to 6%. The capital adequacy could also fall from 23.6% as of September to 21.2% in the base case and 20.2% in the worst case scenario. And as many as 15 NBFCs may not even be able to meet the minimum regulatory capital requirement if the worst case materializes. So that is as far as the stress test result is concerned. Of course, it's a 200-page report, many other highlights that we'll keep bringing to you.
All right, Ritu, many thanks. Do pour over all 200 pages and get back to us. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this edition of Business 360. The news will continue on CNBC TV 18. Stay tuned. We're back in a moment with more.